Hi everyone, it's Charlie. You guys have probably heard by now that DC has officially canceled all their movie Comic-Con plans. No Wonder Woman 1984 trailer, no Birds of Prey trailer. Even though DC doesn't really do movie phases in the way that Marvel does phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, they still have big blocks of movies, so you'd think that they would also be announcing what their next big block of movies is going to be. Normally, studios still give a big blanket excuse about why they skip Comic-Con, but it's a little bit different in the case of DC movies this year. There's really like 6 big reasons, and a lot of it has to do with what the future of Warner Brothers is going to look like, because there's a lot of stuff that's being changed behind the scenes right now. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the Easter egg videos. There's a bunch of stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're doing a new round of the IMAX ticket giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave your favorite DC movie on the video. First things first though, DCTV will be at Comic-Con. There's a bunch of panels. I'll explain what those are at the end of this because they'll be showing off trailers. They'll be showing off the first episode of a couple new TV shows. But normally, because the Joker movie, Wonder Woman 1984, and Birds of Prey are the next DC movies coming up, you would think that they would have Comic-Con panels. Like the Joker is just coming up a couple months after Comic-Con. So why wouldn't they have a big Hall H presence? Like, here, check out this really weird, really cool Joker movie that we just made. It's going to be totally idiosyncratic. The studio's official comment was that we're not ready to show anything off yet. But if you remember last year at Comic-Con, they did a Wonder Woman 1984 panel, and they'd only been shooting the movie for a week or two, and they still came and did a Comic-Con panel. So if they finished shooting Wonder Woman 1984 earlier this year, then it's not like they don't have footage to show off. And Birds of Prey is going to drop in February, so they're probably even further along in production, so of course they would have something to show off, and we've already seen the first Joker trailer, so clearly they have footage ready to go for that. Really, there are 6 big reasons why they just opted to completely skip Comic-Con, and a lot of it has to do with what's going on with the other movies and the structural changes they made behind the scenes. So number 6, you guys may have heard about what's going on with Warner Brothers and AT&T. They just hired a brand new CEO named Ann Sarnoff, so she's literally just starting her job right now and trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes as they sort of consolidate all their media, because AT&T just bought Time Warner, which owns Warner Brothers, which owns all this content that they're trying to consolidate for their new streaming service that's going to launch in 2020 next year. So all these executives are evaluating which TV shows they're going to keep, where they're going to put everything, and there's just a lot of structural stuff that they have to figure out behind the scenes. Also, what they're going to do with the future of their DC movies slate, like which movies and which TV shows they're going to develop next. 5, next big reason is because of J.J. Abrams. You wonder, why would J.J. Abrams be a reason for DC movies to skip Comic-Con? Well, if you didn't hear about it recently, Warner Brothers just won a bid with Bad Robot Studios, J.J. Abrams' house where he produces all of his movies, his TV shows, to exclusively develop movies and television shows for Warner Brothers and AT&T now. It's a landmark deal. You may have heard about big creators being signed by Netflix for hundreds of millions of dollars. Greg Berlanti, who does all the DCTV shows, just got a $300 million deal. So J.J. Abrams is obviously now the new crown jewel in Warner Brothers' stable of creators. As you may have seen in the last 10 years, J.J. Abrams has kind of become known as the guy who redevelops and revitalizes huge franchises. What is a giant franchise that is desperately in need of being revitalized at Warner Brothers? What a surprise, the DC Universe. So you can bet that all the other projects that J.J. Abrams is developing on his own, his original IP projects, Warner Brothers probably wants him to help them with the DC Universe. But the ink on the deal that he just signed with Warner Brothers is not completely dry yet. So obviously that's something that they would want to announce. Like J.J. Abrams is going to be developing all these huge TV shows and movies for us, and he'll also be doing these next couple of big DC movies. So they're probably waiting for a lot of contracts to settle before they can announce a lot of those next big projects. So you wanted a really awesome Green Lantern movie, you wanted a really awesome Man of Steel sequel, J.J. Abrams is now probably the leading candidate for those projects. And number 4, the next Justice League sequel. If anybody were able to handle something that big, J.J. Abrams is one of those people. Even though I think there are a couple other directors out there that could handle something that big, and it's going to be a long time before we actually see a Justice League sequel, he's the kind of safe bet, slam dunk pick that Warner Brothers and AT&T would feel good about spending $250 million on if they were going to try for another Justice League movie in the next 4 or 5 years. If you remember, though, the new mantra of the DC universe is that even though a lot of the stuff is still connected, they're not quite as connected as the movies used to be before. So they're still letting each of the directors kind of do their own things with the movies, and then when it comes time for another big team-up movie, they'll sort of loosely tie things together that whatever the story of that movie winds up being, it'll be relatively self-contained. You won't have to have watched every single other DC movie to get there. If you don't remember, way back in 2002, around his Felicity days, J.J. Abrams had a script for a Superman movie called Superman Flyby. We actually have a synopsis for that movie in a couple of the storyboards, so it actually sounds pretty crazy. Superman Flyby was an origin story that included Krypton besieged by a civil war between Jor-El and his corrupt brother, Kata Zor. Before Kata Zor sentences Jor-El to prison, Kal-El is launched to Earth to fulfill a prophecy. Adopted by Jonathan and Martha Kent, he forms a romance with Lois Lane in the Daily Planet. However, Lois is more concerned with exposing Lex Luthor, written as a government agent obsessed with UFO phenomena. Clark reveals himself to the world as Superman, bringing Kata Zor's son, Ty Zor, and 3 other Kryptonians to Earth. That sounds kind of familiar, really giving off some Richard Donner vibes. Superman is defeated and killed, and visits Jor-El, who committed suicide on Krypton while in prison in Kryptonian heaven. Later, Superman is resurrected, he returns to Earth and defeats the 4 Kryptonians, while the script left off with a Superman flying to Krypton, leaving a cliffhanger for a sequel. So it was sort of a remix of some of the elements from the Richard Donner Superman films, as well as the death and rebirth of Superman. The only thing that J.J. Abrams has said about that movie, obviously they didn't wind up making it, is the thing that I tried to emphasize in the story was that if the Kents found this boy, Kal-El, who had the power that he did, he would most likely have killed them both in short order. That sounds pretty hardcore, but you have to remember this is J.J. Abrams way back in the early 2000s. He goes on to say, and the idea that these parents would see, if they were lucky to survive long enough, that they had to immediately begin teaching this kid to limit himself and not be so fast, not be so strong, not be so powerful. The result of that psychologically would be fear of oneself, self-doubt, and being ashamed of what you were incapable of. Extrapolating that to adulthood became a fascinating psychological profile of someone who was not pretending to be Clark Kent, but who was Clark Kent, who had become that kind of a character who was not able or willing to accept who he was and what his destiny was. The idea of the movie was that he became Superman because he realized he had to finally own his strength in what he'd always been. I don't know if that's what talking about Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan are doing, but it looks like that's part of the idea, and I could not be more thrilled to see that movie. That, to me, was always the way to go. So that was him talking about this before the big Man of Steel reboot with Henry Cavill. So clearly he has some ideas about the Superman character, even though I don't think that he would redo his version of this old script. He would probably do something totally different, and I actually would rather see him do Green Lantern, just because it's something that is a desperate need of being revitalized at DC. We've had at least a couple good Superman films in the past 20 to 30 years. We have not had a good Green Lantern movie yet. So that should be at the top of a lot of people's lists, and Green Lantern Corps is actually the path to Blackest Night, War of Light, which is another big Justice League level crossover that they could do in the future if everything works out with the Green Lantern franchise. The other big reasons why DC has to skip Comic-Con are because of what's going on with the Batman right now. They're just not far enough along in production. They're not ready to show anything off. They don't want to give away any concept art just because they don't want people to start developing preconceived notions about what it's going to look like. Even though we know we have Robert Pattinson, we know we're probably going to get the Penguin, Catwoman, Riddler, Firefly, maybe a couple other Batman villains, but they haven't cast the rest of those actors or actresses yet. And it's actually starting to seem like they're doing a version of Long Halloween for the movie, maybe Dark Victory and Long Halloween. So if any new details about that leak out, I will do new videos this summer, no worries. But then number 2, because of the Flash movie, they still have to figure out whether or not they're going to fire Ezra Miller or they're going to do his script that he's developing with Grant Morrison, which is competing with a script from the directors of the movie, who are the 2 writers of Spider-Man Homecoming. They're also doing their own script for the Flash movie, and now Ezra Miller, in a bid to try and stay on as the Flash because his contract is almost up, is trying to develop his own version of a script with Grant Morrison separately, hoping that if the studio does his script, they'll keep him on as the Flash.
It's getting really good. It's getting really good now. You know, anyone who knows anything about Barry Allen knows that he's always late. But then when he arrives...
So Warner Brothers just is not ready to decide whether or not to hire or fire Ezra Miller for this Flash movie. because they're supposed to start shooting that relatively soon. And then lastly, number one, also because of the Suicide Squad, they're getting ready to shoot that really soon too. And even though it sounds like it's going to be a really cool movie, they're just not ready to show anything off. And there was a big debacle with James Gunn. So there's just so much stuff happening that DC's like, you know what? We're going to take a mulligan this year. We have all this TV stuff that we'll send. You guys can watch that. That'll tide you over. Maybe we'll drop a couple clips sometime over the summer for Wonder Woman. No worries. The bigger news there, not to bury any of the leads though, is the future of the DC movie universe with J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot. Even though they're still letting all the directors do their own thing, it does sound like he might have a little more creative oversight in what the bigger movies wind up being. Like Patty Jenkins has the Wonder Woman franchise on lockdown, so she's already started talking about Wonder Woman 3. That's basically going to take care of itself, but there's so many other movies that they need to take care of. They need to figure out what they're doing with The Flash, what they're doing with Superman, what they're doing with the Green Lantern Corps, and what they're doing with their Justice League team-up films. So let me know in the comments, what DC movie do you want J.J. Abrams to do first? Whatever that winds up being, we probably won't see it for another 3 years, bare minimum. So right now my top picks are Green Lantern Corps or a Man of Steel sequel. But all the DC TV shows are still going to Comic-Con. Most of their panels are happening Saturday night. They'll be dropping trailers for everything. They haven't completely confirmed which of the DC Universe shows have been canceled and which have been renewed. Titans is probably going to be fine no matter what. They'll drop a Titans Season 2 trailer. They have Jorah Mormont from Game of Thrones playing Batman during Season 2. He'll actually be walking around. You'll hear him talking in scenes. It won't be the weird thing where they did before where he stands in the shadows and you never actually see his face. They've got Superboy, they've got Crypto, they've got a new version of Deathstroke, Ravager, Jericho. Then I think there are going to be a couple surprises. I believe that they're going to do the Titans Tower in San Francisco. I'll do as many trailer videos as I can, but a lot of the DC stuff on Saturday night is going to overlap with the Marvel Studios Marvel Phase 4 panel, so I'll figure out my schedule when we get a little bit closer. Don't worry, it's going to be crazy just like it is every single year at Comic-Con, but it's going to be really cool. While you wait for everything, click here for that Thor Guardians of the Galaxy 3 teaser, and click here for that brand new Spider-Man Far From Home trailer and learn about Venom crossover in future movies. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.